Hello, hello everyone, and welcome to this session today. It's part of our International Trade Week sessions, and ACCA is very pleased to be partnered with Intuit and others in terms of presenting this across to you. So ACCA is the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. We're a global professional body with 773,000 members and students in 181 countries around the world. As we said, we're proud to be able to support this week and bring value to our members and all businesses on actually how to get your businesses on the right track. If I could just ask people to just go on mute for a second, that would be greatly appreciated. So if you could turn your mics off. Our session today is one in a series that we are running. They'll also be pre-recorded, and they cover trade remedies, access to finance, cyber, around the world global trip with our accountants from different countries, and today's session on AI. And our panel will actually share with you the opportunities they see, their experience and their practical suggestions on utilizing AI wherever you choose to trade. We're joined by ACCA's Head of Policy Development, Narayanan, and also a very valued partner, ACCA's Intuit, Jim, who's the General Manager of Intuit MailChimp, and he'll provide some insight and practical solutions into a number of areas. So before we start, as we just said a second ago, please do keep your microphones on mute. Please use the chat function because where we've got time for additional questions at the end, we'll be picking those up and asking those on your behalf to our panelists. I'm not sure if Jim is quite on the call yet. Jim, are you on the call or not? If not, we'll move over to Narayanan. Narayanan, would you mind starting us off on some of that AI insight?
Sure. Thank you, Glenn. Can you see and hear me clearly?
We can see and hear you clearly. Thank you, Narayanan.
Fantastic. So first of all, a very warm welcome to everyone. Absolutely delighted to have this opportunity to connect with all of you. I'm Narayanan. As Glenn said, I'm Head of Policy Development. My comments around AI come from my current role around policy issues where we are working with the UK government and indeed with governments around the world. I oversee a team of policy professionals in various parts of the world, including EU, US, China, and Southeast Asia, Singapore, for example. So one of the things we're seeking to do is both understand what AI means and how it has policy ramifications, but also what's happening in the rest of the world and how we can bring the best of that to our discussions here in the UK as well. The other thing I would say is that the reason we take this perspective is because what we find often with policymakers is they can tend to assume that if they're talking about AI, they just need to go to a big tech provider. That's often their first port of call, and they might not always realize that the accountancy profession has something really important to say in this space. It's got members who have very structured training in areas like assurance, in areas like risk control, internal controls, and governance. And all of these are very, very important pillars if we are going to create an approach to the deployment of AI at scale, which is going to be sustainable and which is going to be done in a way where organizations don't end up on the front page of newspapers as a result of doing it the wrong way around. The whole concept of deploying it in a responsible, ethical way is obviously fundamental. And that really forms the basis for some of my comments today. So with that little preamble, if that's okay, I will try and share my screen now and take it from there. When I am sharing, I'll be on full screen, which means that I won't be able to see any comments in the chat, but please feel free to go ahead and add any thoughts, comments, questions, and we'll try and get to it at the end when I come off the shared screen. Thank you. Right, so let's try and do this. Glenn, I wonder if you could let me know if you can see the screen.
Yes, that's up now, Narayanan.
Fantastic. Okay, great. So the immediate context, just in the interest of specificity, I wanted to anchor my comments in a very specific piece of work we did, which was a response to the UK government's white paper, which they put out earlier this year, asking for responses on their approach to AI. And Their white paper was termed a pro-innovation approach to AI regulation. And our response, which we conducted jointly with EY, actually, was called Building the Foundations for Trusted Artificial Intelligence. The reason we partnered with EY is because obviously ACCA is coming at this from a public interest point of view. And we come very much from the perspective that a rising tide lifts all boats, and we want to see greater understanding across the ecosystem of AI. But we also feel it's important to understand what different stakeholders are seeing and what their clients are telling them. So that was partly some of the thinking around why we wanted to also inform our views with some of that. There are really three things I wanted to cover. One is just some of the key things around the white paper at high level, just to set the context, and with a little bit of, I guess, background in mind in respect of SMEs who are particularly important to this conversation we're having today. Also to talk about what it means in terms of the accountancy profession and the space of responsible AI, and a few thoughts in terms of where we left it in terms of our final thoughts to government as we look ahead, and where we think some important perspectives need to be made. So on that very first piece, just looking at it at the top level, I think one of the things to say in terms of the UK government approach, and you can have a spectrum of approaches here. You can have a very highly prescriptive approach, very highly laid out rules and prescribed rules approach, and some would argue that the EU is probably closer to that space. I think the UK has gone in a slightly different direction, which is to take what it's called a pro-innovation approach, and which is to say that they don't want to over-regulate upfront, recognizing that this is a very fast-moving space, and we've already seen with things like frontier AI and foundation models, the EU has had to backtrack and create retrofit some new ways of how they're looking at things because it exploded so suddenly. Generative AI exploded so suddenly in recent months. So in that sense, you might argue that the UK approach is potentially a little bit more future-proofed. It's basically relying on existing regulators as much as possible, and also taking a sector-based view, recognizing that different sectors, the detail and the domain detail can be different, but we have in the UK a really strong regulatory environment across different sectors. And actually that's something that's respected around the world in terms of the rule of law and the ability for those regulatory ecosystems to work as they should. And in some cases like financial services and the FCA in banking and so forth, there are very good examples of things like regulatory sandboxes, which are viewed as examples around the world. So the idea is starting from that space, and it's really about where the balance lies between regulation and innovation. So how much do you regulate to ensure that consumers are protected and those who don't understand as much about this space are protected, while on the other hand, giving space to innovators and who are often SMEs to take the risks they need to take and to be able to try and bring new products and services to market in an efficient way. They're not the people who are going to have lots of money to spend on regulatory compliance typically, and also who find it much harder to upskill. So there's a balance to be had there. As I said, unknown unknowns are a really important factor when it comes to AI. And I think overall, our view is that the UK government has probably taken a view, and this is an open consultation that we responded to. They're going to look at what the feedback is from the marketplace. And they're also going to keep this open over the next 6 months or so. I would imagine that they will see how much this approach is holding up. And I don't think it rules out the ability for them to, in fact, I know that it doesn't rule out the ability for them to come in down the track with more prescriptive regulation if needed. So that is the general mood music of where the UK regulation on AI is going. Now, against that big picture backdrop, I just wanted to reflect a little bit on what it means when we think about the international and domestic scene. So one of the things that the UK government's approach on AI very much emphasizes is, and you would have seen that in the mood music around the recent Bletchley Park Summit and so forth, which is the desire to be an international convener in respect of AI, and to really try and make sure that, and there were some wins in that space in relation to China participating in this, as well as the US, which in itself is a bit of an achievement for Bletchley, I would think. But I think the broader point is around the fact that AI as a technology, as indeed many technologies, most technologies, is cross-border, it's international, and regulation is jurisdictional. So there's a very important piece here around international harmonization to try and reduce And we are here at an international trade kind of context, and there's a huge piece around reducing friction when trying to do things across jurisdictional boundaries. And a big part of, I think, what the UK, both in its AI white paper and more generally, promotes, and we as ACCA feel very strongly about as well, as a global body that has always promoted global standards, even in other spaces, whether it's IFRS or whatever it is, very much taking the view that where possible, harmonized, internationally applicable, globally relevant standards reduce the cost of doing business, reduce friction, and I think that's going to be an important parameter in relation to AI as well. But I think there are also some domestic considerations that were brought out within the regulatory considerations in the UK. One is, first of all, around multi-stakeholder feedback. What we don't want to do is for the conversation, I think, large organizations tend to be ahead of the curve and they have something to offer and expertise and views to offer, and that's great. But it's really important that SMEs are part of the conversation in terms of feeding in to what their clients are telling them and feeding into what they're seeing within the ecosystem and what their needs are. And that's really important from a policy point of view for government to understand. And I think another part of that multi-stakeholder aspect, certainly within the UK, is, if you like, the leveling up aspect of it. I think it's great that there are some fantastic SMEs and fantastic sources of expertise in London and the Southeast. But it's really important to remember that there are sources of expertise all around the country and the 4 nations of the UK. As part of responding to this white paper, we participated in a roundtable with the accountancy regulator, the FRC, in Manchester. And that was done very specifically outside London and the Southeast to draw in a slightly different pool of stakeholders to the conversation as well. And we found that there were some really interesting examples of things that people are doing across the country. And I think it's really important to have that multi-stakeholder input into what's happening on the ground so that the regulatory approach isn't blinkered. I think overall, the point I was making earlier around ensuring that the regulatory burden is thought of in a proportionate way is something that the government, I think, is very supportive of. And in fact, proportionate amount of regulation is something that is explicitly stated in the white paper and in terms of their approach. So against that wider backdrop, I just wanted to reflect a little bit more on the accountancy profession and where all of this discussion around AI regulation and responsible AI, where that intersects. So I think the first thing to say is that there are lots of things within the accountancy profession in terms of standards and governance frameworks that are relevant to this discussion. So I think the first one I'd call out is the UK Corporate Governance Code. And obviously the FRC, as some of you will be aware, issued out a consultation seeking views on some amendments. Sadly, for various reasons, a lot of those have not been, it doesn't look like they're going to be taken up, but possibly just under half of those will be considered for updating. But I think the broader point here in relation to AI is that there is something which is really going to be important for accountancy and finance professionals to understand in terms of the role of boards if their organizations are going to be engaging with AI in a responsible manner. The code obviously operates along this comply or explain basis, and it will require an understanding of the impact on the company's position and prospects. Now, the key thing with AI is that it is relatively new, and things like emerging and principal risks and how they're going to be mitigated and what internal controls are there is going to be really important. What you don't want, obviously, is something to come out of the blue and that hasn't been flagged as any kind of going concern and which becomes an existential risk, which could affect the company in terms of its ability to operate over the next 12 months. So there is, some important things to consider there. The other thing also with AI is the risk of weak signals. I think, unless there is systems and processes across the organization, it might be difficult to discharge the duties in a responsible manner if people don't understand that weak signals could translate very quickly or could escalate very quickly, and the ability to track those and at least be aware of them, even if today they happen to be weak signal risks. I think the Companies Act is obviously another relevant parameter in terms of directors' duties. Section 172 within that notes, as it says there, the duty to consider wider stakeholder impact, and that could have some relevancy in relation to AI. One of the things with AI is that it feeds off data, particularly when you look at wider foundation models and things like that. There's often a huge amount of public data from the internet that's going into it. Some of it may be copyright data. There's a huge amount of different sources of things that are going into it, and also the impact of AI could have a huge set of ramifications, not just one's customers but also wider society. Bias and discrimination issues that go beyond the immediate stakeholders, but also wider societal stakeholders. So the nature of this technology, as you may have heard, is general purpose technology. It has a much wider scope of impact. And therefore, that element of wider stakeholder impact could come into play when thinking about obligations in relation to the Companies Act. There are obviously also questions around contract and licensing. A lot of accountancy and finance professionals aren't going to be the people who actually develop the AI products. They're going to be going through a procurement process to bring it into their organization. So understanding implications for things like IP, if you're bringing in for example, if you're an SME dealing with often another SME that might be providing an AI product whose AI model is using your data to train its models, what is the ownership of that training data? What is the relationship within the contracts and within the licensing agreements that you've got? And what does that mean in terms of your relationships with suppliers and business conduct related to that? I did talk a little bit earlier about weak signals and black swan events, and I think that also will come into play here. I did also want to emphasize that from an SME perspective, they shouldn't feel that they are completely operating in a black hole with no idea what they need to do. There is a lot of work going on in terms of guidance around international standards. There's in fact just to share a new standard from the ISO. Which is the International Organization for Standardization, and it's called IEC 23894, as it says. There's a new risk management standard that's been released this year, actually. And it really offers some guidance around how companies can manage the risk connected to the development and use of AI. And it builds on an earlier version, which is a little bit more generic, but which is also really helpful for smaller organizations that are looking to just get their head around where do I start and where do I just get some simple frames that are globally, that have been through a really globally rigorous process of arriving at and which are recognized around the world. There are others that talk about the role of leadership, as you can see there, 42001, which was in 2022, came out, and also one at the bottom there, which was 24368, that provides a view of that multi-stakeholder, broader societal impact risks around ethical and societal concerns that I was making reference to earlier. There are, again, in that vein, things around enterprise risk management, so the COSO framework, and they've also been doing some work in this space, looking at how you need to think about risk assessment of AI models and how the algorithm manages and uses data, portfolio risks, and also board training. So some views around that. And often for boards, it's not a question of really understanding all of the detail, obviously, but you need to be able to navigate around it. And you need to be able to ask relevant questions around it. And that in itself can be quite challenging as well. And it also connects with other areas. As you look at more and more complex AI models, you might even find yourself straying into areas of ESG if the AI models are actually using a huge amount of energy, and that might be part of your analysis of how which products and which providers are more attractive than others. Finally, from an accountancy profession point of view, it's worth saying that the International Ethics Standards Board for Accountants, which, as you will know, has established the 5 foundational principles, ethical principles that accountancy bodies around the world, including ACCA, follow and our members follow. They have a technology working group. They've been looking at exploring the potential impact of technology on professional accountants. And there are various things that they've been talking about in terms of, and that's an ongoing piece of work right now. And the view is that the code may need to be looked at a little bit more in certain areas. For example, whether firms and organizations, when they're using client or customer data for internal purposes, such as training AI models, what are the ethical implications in relation to that? So there are some questions there that are being worked through, parameters that should be in place in terms of prior informed consent, transparency and explainability of the models that are being used, specifically when the professional accountant is relying on it, the code implications, whether it needs to be revised to address custody of financial or non-financial data belonging to clients or customers or third parties, and also the ability to communicate meaningfully with boards about technology-related risks and exposures. I was talking earlier about the ability of boards to be informed, but there's also an ability of, I think, accountancy and finance professionals who are updating boards to be able to give them the right kind of information to enable that. So I guess when you add it all up, looking ahead, and I started this conversation talking about this piece of work we've done in relation to responding to the UK government white paper, and we've been also in addition to responding to that and putting out position papers and policy papers, we were also invited to a session to the party conferences, and we laid out our views. And obviously ACCA is completely non-political. We work across the political spectrum, but in this case it's also just to give an example of how we get our views across to stakeholders who are in government, who are working with government, who are questioning government across all aspects of that in order to ensure that the right questions are being asked. So I think in summary, there's something around the need to act fast on the detail, because I think the white paper from the UK government sets out a good framework, but there's detail that needs to be brought out there. There's something around aligning internationally around harmonization, but also coordinating domestically around different sectors and how the banking sector regulator is far more advanced than some other sectors, for example, in relation to AI. And if the white paper, as it suggests, is going to rely on existing sector regulation, then there needs to be some common frame around coordinating how AI is deployed across these sectors. There's something around multi-stakeholder feedback and involvement, as I was saying, whether it's the voice of SMEs, whether it's different parts of the UK. And also importantly, and we make this very forcefully in our response to government, around the role of the accountancy profession. It's mature, it's skilled, it's an asset, and you need to draw upon it in terms of audit and assurance of AI systems as they're rolled out, corporate governance, in terms of risk, in terms of internal controls. These are all things where the accountancy profession has a really meaningful voice and a role to play. So with that, I will stop my comments for now. I hope that gives a little bit of a flavor and sets the scene as we go into further discussion around specific use cases and so forth. I hope that sets the big picture scene of where we're at and what we're trying to do overall in relation to AI. Glenn,
thanks, Narayanan. Thanks, Narayanan. I think great insight into this rolling and continuing development that is happening, and perhaps that importance of making sure you get things right from the start. At least have some policies, some procedures, some other practical work in place. Great pleasure of bringing Jim into this session, and Jim, I know Intuit are one of the organizations which are highlighted as an organization to watch because you're fairly well advanced in some of the AI technology you actually use. Really looking for you for some of your insight into the marketplace and actually how you're seeing some of that open up. Narayanan's given us a bit of the framework and a bit of the ongoing debate, sometimes a confused debate going on out there in the wider world. What are you seeing actually on the practical side on the ground when you're going through and you're dealing with clients and actually governments and other individuals?
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. And thanks to the ACCA for hosting this and inviting me along. You're right. There's a huge amount of noise going on in the market, in the media. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of discussion, and as a result, I think it's really helpful for SMEs, SMBs to attend and to learn as much as they can about the specifics of AI and how it's relevant to their business. I really enjoyed the presentation a second ago because it kind of describes how complex this is. But I think it's also important for everybody to realize that there are some really exciting AI tools out there which are responsible, safe, accessible right now, which will enable small businesses to thrive in what is currently some challenging economic conditions, but also further down the line when everything gets more optimistic. So I'll talk a little bit about Intuit and Intuit MailChimp, which is the organization I run in EMEA. and then I'll dive into some specifics around how we're supporting small businesses all over the world. So a lot of the audience may have heard of Intuit via the QuickBooks brand, the accounting and financial management software that serves millions of firms around the world. The mission of Intuit is to enable and empower small businesses to thrive. And the unfortunate stat is that roughly 50% of small businesses fail in the first 5 years of their life. And our mission is to take that stat and extend it, right? We want to give these small organizations the best opportunity to thrive beyond that 5-year window and increase the percentage that thrive by 20 percentage points, right? So we like to think a pretty good job of that so far. And the investment we've made in AI tools over the last few years is speaking directly to that mission. How can we put powerful, innovative tools in the hands of small businesses to enable them to grow and thrive, irrespective of the market conditions? About 5 years ago, our CEO, our leadership declared that AI is going to change everything, right? It will completely alter the way that we do things as businesses, as consumers. And 5 years later, with now this in the water, seems like he was proved right, which is helpful. And I'm going to share with you some specifics about MailChimp. So MailChimp is a marketing automation solution developed for entrepreneurs, SMEs, small businesses, enabling them to solve one of their biggest and most important challenges, which is how do I find new customers, or how do I engage with the customers I have and able to understand more about what I do as an organization so I can drive growth and revenue, right? That's the core of what MailChimp does. And what's exciting is that we've been at the heart of the AI innovation race over the last year or so. We've released dozens of new tools literally over the last few months. And the way we think about this is, how do we help small organizations dramatically augment the skills that they have in their business when it comes to marketing and engaging with new or existing customers? And or if those marketing skills and talents aren't available within that organization, either they're unable to hire them, or they're not at the stage yet where making those decisions make sense, how do we bring those skills into the organizations and allow small businesses without marketing talent to become relatively sophisticated marketers in their own rights? And that's really at the heart of all of the innovations over the last few months. And the way that we think about those two things in more practical terms is, how do we dramatically improve or increase the productivity of those responsible for marketing within an organization? So typically within a small business, the marketing function is either very, very small internally, or it's outsourced to freelancers or consultants. A lot of our partner ecosystem is made up of those small freelance agencies. They're always tight for time. They're always tight for resource. So bringing AI into those organizations and removing or reducing a lot of the what some would call the heavy lifting, what others would call the administrative side of building and delivering marketing campaigns through AI powered tools. So as an example, using AI, or one of our newest solutions, Intuit AI Assist, which is enabling marketers to edit or deploy or create campaigns in a fraction of the time it would enable them to do so. So AI at the point of creation or at the point of deployment, enabling those marketers or those freelancers to cut out huge amounts of the process and the administration it takes to get campaigns up and out the door, and then also to measure and adjust and iterate and innovate on those campaigns. So when it comes to productivity and efficiency, bringing AI into these organizations is a huge boost. to the other point, how are we bringing marketing or advanced or sophisticated marketing skills into organizations where there's no function there at all? And again, this is where our AI solutions are really pioneering and helping SMBs to kind of democratize that skill a little bit. So as an example, one of our core propositions is email content creation, right? So as many of the folks in our organization are accountants, of course, and asking an accountant to create innovative and engaging email copy, I imagine is quite a challenging request, right? Even your supporting team, if you don't have that marketing expertise or you can't outsource it, where do you start, right? You know you want to engage with your audience. You're really clear that you've got a really strong message to share with them about your expertise, how you can help your customers manage their finances or grow their business. But where do you start with that if you're not a marketer? So Intuit Assist and the content creation tools within Intuit MailChimp can create that email copy on your behalf. So creating engaging copy based on your audience, based on the message that you want to send. And in that respect, you then become an editor as opposed to a creator of that content. So you can look at it in a bunch of different ways. You can look at it as it gives you a jumping off point. Let's create some copy based on who you want to talk to and what you want to talk to them about. And then you can, as an expert in what your organization does, you can then edit and evolve based on having that jumping off point. Or you can use it as the means to generate that content, and you are then the human overseeing what's going out. You check it and go, yeah, that looks great. Away we go. So all of the evidence and all of the statistics underlying marketing and engaging with your customers, that's there for the world to see and share. Enabling SMB small businesses to leverage the power of that marketing-led engagement, that CRM-led engagement, when they either have limited resource or no resource or expertise at all, is really where AI is and can be and is a game changer for organizations like this. So I know further down the line we've got a demo that we're going to show, but the key here is, if we believe that engaging with our customers to drive meaningful content, engaging two-way conversations which promote services or solve problems is a great way to do it. We have the tools to execute and the tools to create. And it's a really exciting time right now, because we're deploying this all across EMEA. It's available in the UK right now. All of those tools to drive AI-assisted campaigns, and organizations that adopt these capabilities, we know will have a head start, right? We know they will be able to make quantum leaps forward in terms of their ability to engage with their customers at scale.
Thanks, Jim. And I think that, for me, when I'm looking at it, you've just spoken about democratization of that entire function coming through. If I'm looking at it from an accountancy side, I'm going, actually, you've just narrowed down my window and my time frame. So resources tied up, and effect on cash flows, effect on people coming through, on products and on timeline suddenly alters quite dramatically when you start to use this and put this into your particular plans, which is obviously where we're coming from on looking at an international trade perspective, the opportunities within different markets, and actually opening up a lot of those. You're looking at, how do I put that into my entire planning around that, which is a theme we've been running through this week on some of our international trade week support. So really, really great to hear about the acceleration of those campaigns, and actually also how they're targeted going through. I think it's always difficult to visualize sometimes. I don't know whether you want to run through and perhaps give us that demonstration, which will perhaps bring some of it to life.
I'd love to. I think we've shared the link to the demo with your team, just to make it. It's just, if I run it, I will be, I'm not sure it would be as effective. So I think Bridget maybe has a link and she can start sharing the content.
AI to create hundreds of personalized layouts tailored to. Let's take a look at Intuit Assist and MailChimp. Starting with email marketing. Imagine telling Intuit Assist, I want to create an email campaign to announce a new product I'm releasing. Intuit Assist will use generative AI to create hundreds of personalized layouts tailored to your email's objective. First, select the draft you like most. Intuit Assist will draft the full email for you in your brand style with the images and text already set up for you. Next, tell Intuit Assist who you'd like to target with the email. It will translate your prompt into a precise audience segment. Your draft is personalized and ready to send. However, if you want to make adjustments, you can always click on the text and images to make easy edits. Is the tone a little dry? No problem. Our AI text editor can rewrite the email in a different tone, or generate something totally new with guidance from you. Need to optimize an image? Our image editor will be able to remove background color and more. We know you're the true creative here, but Intuit Assist can also use data and AI to recommend what we think works best. After you've scheduled the email, you will see it added to your marketing calendar. And MailChimp will automatically recommend a follow-up action to make sure you see the most engagement possible. You will be able to ask how your last campaign performed. MailChimp will create a summary of the performance metrics across multiple marketing touchpoints. And Intuit Assist will supercharge it with actionable and specific recommendations to increase a marketing metric or optimize performance in your next campaign. This is an example of how Intuit Assist will guide you through everyday decisions for your business. That's not all. Small business owners often tell us what frustrates them most is managing their inbox and following up on emails that interrupt their workflow. So we've automated that too. With MailChimp, you can automate your sales pipeline and qualify leads faster. As potential leads come in, Intuit Assist will automatically draft responses to these leads in MailChimp, using your product and service data from QuickBooks. It will continue to help draft responses with you until they're identified as fully qualified leads. And once confirmed, Intuit Assist will automatically update your MailChimp sales pipeline so you can track your customer's life cycle, saving you time and letting you focus on what matters most.
Great, thanks for clicking. So I hope that brought the examples to life in terms of what I was saying before. Those two areas that we're trying to solve for. How do you dramatically augment the skills that you already have, either internally or outsourced? Or if you don't yet have those skills or talents or resources internally, how do you start? Like, what's your jumping off point? How do you create communications for your existing or your new audiences that will allow you to start driving that engagement, driving the customer revenue? And then how do you manage that customer engagement in an automated way afterwards? And we talk about, you spoke about new markets a second ago, Glenn. This is incredibly important, because when you're dealing with new audiences, you generally have very little information to go on when it comes to how those engagements should run. Like, what's the recommended approach, either a new segment or a new industry or even a new country, right? So the power of Intuit Assist and the AI tools that were created will allow you to create that engagement through the recommendations that we drive. So it was hinted at a little bit there in the demonstration. It's creates an engaging email with customers of this type in this country, for example. So you can select your template, and then based on that criteria, the solution will create the email content based on the optimum way to engage with those customers. And then you can review and you can edit, or you can simply deploy and then manage all of the recommended follow-ups and analyze the data and understand how it's performing, etc. So it's an incredibly powerful way to enable businesses of any size, in any market, in any segment, to communicate at scale, to enhance either existing capabilities or close gaps where there are none. And most importantly, measure success, right? How is this doing? How is it impacting my business? What are the recommended next steps I should take based on the information that I'm seeing?
Jim, yeah, absolutely. I think it's opens all these areas up. We have a couple of questions actually in the chat. And one is looking at it's from Simon, who's an ACCA member and a friend of ACCA, and he's asking a couple of different questions. Number one is a sector type of question, and that's how can MailChimp use to be target of different sectors? He's highlighted accountancy and legal, but I'm assuming from your penetration, you would go across many different sectors out there. So there will be sector specific language that can be brought into an awful lot of that marketing opportunity.
Yeah, and this is what's really interesting is this is developing all the time, right? And the power of AI is a function of the data it has access to, right? So if in your audience you have profiles of organizations that are from different sectors, from different industries, then the AI solutions within MailChimp will analyze all of the criteria that relates to those industries or those segments based on the questions you ask, right? So if one of your criteria is an audience of accountants, for the sake of argument, you can ask, and one of your services is providing payroll and tax advice to a particular segment. You can type into Intuit Assist, create an email campaign promoting my services to this segment, right? And AI, it will then generate engaging content relevant to that audience, using the information that sits within MailChimp and within your organization to promote or describe or engage the services that you're looking to talk about. And then you're able to then either edit or verify, send, and then track the performance and the success of those campaigns that you're sending out, and tweak and optimize based on the recommendations of the system.
I think that is a really game changing. I suppose the follow-on question, which we've got part of that, is around development. And there's a question of, again, Simon has asked, what is the rollout of AI within other tools and some of the accounting tools and other areas. But actually, I would expect you're going to say some of that is sensitive, but actually, as an organization, really AI is embedded with you in providing that enablement across to different users. But keen to hear from your own perspective, your own thoughts on that, Jim. And if you do want to reveal any trade secrets, we're with friends here.
Got it. Well, we are with friends. However, there is information that is sensitive and I can't share, unfortunately. So the first answer to that question is going back 5 years, and our CEO making a bold statement that AI is going to change everything. Like it is the most disruptive and powerful technology to hit the market since the internet, if not more so, right? And since that statement, we've spent 5 years honing our entire business around the development of AI technologies, and we're now seeing the benefits. So what I can share is you will, as a QuickBooks customer, as a MailChimp customer, as a customer of any other brands, you will see continuous innovation, like continuous rollout of new products, enhancements to solutions, which will continuously push the envelope of the capabilities and also what's possible for our customers. I've been at MailChimp for 6 months, and in 6 months, we've had 4 major releases, 2 of which have been dedicated to AI. So the pace of this will continue, and we'll take it back to the core mission, which is to enable entrepreneurs and SMEs to thrive. And everything that we're doing is with that mission, that purpose in mind, right? So we have, if we think about QuickBooks and MailChimp, there's over 10 million customers every day telling us what they need. This is what we're trying to do. These are the problems that we have. We're trying to find customers. We're trying to get paid. We're trying to pay people. We're trying to engage. We're trying to grow. So all of our innovation is with that mission in mind, and it's really exciting. It's fascinating to be a part of. There's a lot going on. So the presentation earlier helps put all that into context as well, but tons to come, I can assure you.
And a question for both you and also Narayanan on this. What are you seeing out within the particular marketplaces around businesses starting to put in those processes, procedures, wanting to actually embrace the use of AI, but actually also recognizing that importance of, as Narayanan said earlier, and as you also intimated, that importance of controlling your data and your information that goes out into the public domain. What are you seeing around those areas in particular?
Yeah, so what we see is that this is still early stages for a lot of the adopters, right? There was a really interesting piece of research carried out by Forrester, which describes how so many organizations are still at the cusp of adopting this technology. So I'll do my best to remember the exact stats, but roughly 70 to 80% of marketers believed that AI would be or elements of AI would dramatically improve the ability of their organization to drive engagement and drive revenue. But only 20 to 25% had even experimented with those tools yet, right? So powerful belief within these organizations that these are areas that will change the way that they operate in a positive fashion, but still very early stage in terms of adoption. There's a huge amount of appetite, a huge amount of curiosity, a huge amount of engagement. And as the presentation earlier showed, there's a lot of complexity here, which is why at Intuit, we spend an awful lot of time in investing in this, this idea of safe and responsible AI, right? Our governance procedures, our engagement with local, country level government organizations to allow us to have this exchange of information is incredibly important. And I think we've done a really good job, or our team involved in that have done a really good job in setting the scene for how powerful AI is in terms of its ability to enable organizations to thrive, whilst being very clear that we're doing this in an incredibly responsible way.
Thanks. Maybe I'll just jump in quickly there. So completely echo what Jim was saying there, and I think that's not hugely dissimilar to what we're seeing. I suppose in answer to your question, Glenn, maybe in talking about where people are on AI, let me just back up a couple of steps. So I think step one is where they are on data. So what we see is there are some organizations that are really thinking about their approach to data in a more intentional way. Some will have the terminology in place in terms of getting a data lake in place and ultimately having a centralized source of all the data that they own as an organization and understanding their relationship with the data, what bits they own, what bits they don't. And that's really important in terms of informing a single source of the truth in relation to data. And I think those are the organizations that tend to be further up the curve in terms of really thinking about further advanced technologies. The other allied one is around their relationship with the cloud, and related to both of these, developing the so-called digital core. So, instead of having monolithic systems that need to be brought in and brought out as a whole, you have cloud-based platforms, subscription-based models, and app-based solutions that allow you to take on, whether it's specific workflows in relation to payroll or in relation to something else, but which are much more flexible to both bring in and to upgrade when needed. So all of this stuff can only happen if you've got a more considered approach to data and you're starting to engage very meaningfully with cloud-based platforms. And then often those kind of organizations tend to be the ones that are exploring very actively around AI as well. There are obviously a variety of things there. There are some things around looking at fraud and fraudulent transactions and anomalies, and AI can be very good in spotting that in a slightly more dynamic way compared to a traditional rules-based system. And obviously, in the recent months, with the explosion of generative AI, there are many more opportunities in terms of creating, things like creating reports and things like that. And I think all of those sort of products will also mature more as we look ahead.
Thanks, Narayanan. And just a quick call out: if anybody's got a burning issue they want to put in and ask, please do type your question quickly in the chat, and we'll answer it in those last few minutes. I just want to say thank you for both of you mentioning data, because it actually links in with one of our earlier sessions during the week on cybersecurity, which I think is very much linked in terms of that entire data control, and actually treating data as the valuable asset that is quite often forgotten by an awful lot of businesses. And that's something where accountants will look at and go, actually, yeah, those assets sit there. We want to protect those assets. Directors will look in the same way about that entire protection of those assets. So really great insight around what you're seeing out in that particular marketplace. I suppose a very quick question for me, and Jim, Narayanan, would you be an early adopter, or would you wait and see what's happening in the marketplace on this? Because I know there'll be people who are going, yeah, I want to dive in, and there will be others saying, let's wait and see. Where would you come from on this? I think I could probably guess.
I'll jump in and go. I'm very much in the early adopter camp, Glenn. You guessed right. I was actually we've built an internal AI chatbot solution within Intuit, and I spend probably more hours than I should talking to them, just engaging in conversation. It's a little sad. I'm on my own in this room for 10 hours a day, but I think embracing the opportunity of AI is so important for organizations, especially smaller ones who are always punching upwards, right? They're always trying to acting as the underdog in the global economy. So like the proliferation of tools that are out there is probably a little bit challenging. So, but get really clear on what are the problems or opportunities you think are available right now within your organization. Like what's the thing you really want to solve for, and start embracing some tools that will enable you to tackle some very specific problems, and testing and learning and seeing how it works. The number one issue that customers tell us is finding customers is the hardest thing. How do we find new companies or new consumers to come and engage with us and buy our expertise? And AI-driven tools that enable you to communicate with that new audience and engage with them in a way that gets them excited about how you're able to solve their problems is a huge step towards solving that really difficult challenge.
Yeah, and I think, again, just to echo entirely on a similar page, I think, to Jim on that, I think in terms of, Glenn, your question around early adopters and so forth, yes, I mean, obviously, I'm very supportive of experimenting and testing and learning. Perhaps the one thing I would say is that there's not necessarily something wrong in being a fast follower, if I can use that phrase as well. So you don't always have to, particularly if you're an SME and if your risk appetite is lower. Two things to understand is, firstly, this might not be as expensive as you think it is. A lot of these products are kind of subscription based, or they have models which are, from a working capital point of view, not necessarily a no-go zone, or from in terms of your overall kind of profile of spend and things like that. There are lots of things out there which are targeted at very specific workflows and targeted at very specific solutions for very specific problems. So I think it's important to bear that in mind, and it's not about You're not pulling out your entire IT infrastructure and replacing it with something else. That's not where the ecosystem is at. So I think that means that it's much easier to experiment. It's much easier to try things. And it's also not very difficult both to be an early adopter on certain things or a fast follower even is fine too. But I think the most important thing is to not tune out of it, because I think what you don't want to be doing is like an ostrich digging your head in the sand and saying, I don't want to go anywhere near this. I think that is probably the bigger risk.
And we've had a last minute question. Bertram's actually asked, and this is probably one for Jim, when AI was being looked at and developed, how much was diversity a critical factor in that? And is there a sufficient check to ensure, fairness, as well as some of those compliance areas in that? That's a big question to ask in a probably a minute or two before we close, Jim. But
right at the end, yeah. Thanks, whoever asked that. Appreciate it. But it is a really important topic, and I'll kind of direct you back to our very, very stringent and thoughtful governance procedures, right? Intuit as an organization has at its heart of its values diversity as critical to the health of any thriving communication or company, community, or organization, right? So if you go onto the Intuit website or type Intuit values, you'll see it right there shining. And our values as an organization and the very rigorous, thoughtful governance we're applying to the development and the deployment of AI, that those two will unify, right? So it is an important topic, and it's the sort of thing that we could literally talk about for hours, like taking you through the stages of how our governance procedures work from the C-suite and the executive down to the engineering levels. But that's probably an entirely different presentation.
Bertram, thank you. I think you just teed up a future session for us with so we'll have a good look at those future sessions. So just in closing, I want to say thank you to Jim, thank you to Narayanan. Really great presentation coming through. As we said, this is part of a series that we're running with our colleagues during International Trade Week. We've had sessions on AI today. We've had them on cyber and cyber security. We've also had them on access to finance, and starting very shortly, we've got another one where our council members will take you around the world and some of those business opportunities that they see within their countries. So if you want, please do join that one. All of the recordings will also be available, and ACCA will be using these as well during the coming year. But again, just wanted to say a big thank you for joining. Hopefully you're inspired to trade a bit more internationally, put in place some of those processes, procedures to actually make your life an awful lot easier. But thank you very much, and thank you to Jim, thank you to Narayanan. Many thanks.
Thanks all. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good to be here. Appreciate it.